Hi, Tony from all the remote things here again today, and I'm with the magnificent Ben Hogan. How you
Hi,
going, Ben?
Tony.
You like that introduction?
Thanks. Magnificent. Haven't been called that in a while.
Hey, look, Ben, we've known each other for many, many years, so I'll preface that at the front. We're old friends, but how about you introduce yourself to the good people that are watching this?
Hi, yeah. Well, thanks, Tony. Really great to be here. Absolute pleasure. Um, yeah, I guess how did I get involved with the Remote Agility Framework crew? I guess we've been known each other from the traps through the Agile coaching game back in the day, 20 something years ago, I guess.
Yeah, a long time ago, yeah. We had the
Yeah,
pleasure of doing the Alistair Coburn Advanced Agile inaugural
that's right.
course together as well. We actually
Yeah.
paired on that and we failed, but that's all right. Keep going.
I think the goal was to fail, wasn't it? According to Alistair. Yeah, we did well. Um, so yeah, background in tech, but ended up sort of moving into this more, people and product and strategy stuff over the last few years. Most recently, I guess I've become known for implementing OKRs. I briefly did a stint over in Berlin, and yeah, I guess I did a whole bunch of implementing OKRs there, and that's turned into a whole thing. Um, Got back to Australia, a few years back, just in time for the pandemic, which was crazy, and timing. And yeah, my pandemic project was to create an organisation, Freshwater Academy, which was amongst other things, teaching people and folk how to do OKRs properly. So that's been a huge piece the last few years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great segue. And yeah, we have known each other a very long time. And of course, anybody who's looking for Ben on the web, you'll find him. He's Agile Ben, of course. He's not just Ben, right? So, and we were both a little more hirsute and less grey back in the day
Oh yeah.
when we were doing the work. But that's how it goes. With age comes wisdom, and with wisdom comes OKRs, apparently. So let's have a chat around OKRs. That is the thing that you've been well known for a while, and we will get into some of the other things because obviously you're not just doing that. But I really do want to talk to you about objectives and key results because it has sort of taken the corporate world by storm, and every organisation you walk into starts to talk about OKRs. Um, can you explain just one quick line what OKRs are for us?
Yeah, I think of them as both a really pithy little structure, but also as a framework, a goal-setting framework. So I love what Philippe Castro said in terms of, it's not just setting the OKRs, it's also achieving them and reflecting on whether that was where you wanted to go, whether you learned anything. So I feel like we often think of OKRs as an objective statement with some key results or measures, and that's it. But I feel like that's the form, that's what they look like. Whereas what they are is a way to help you learn and achieve goals. So yeah, I think that's a bit broader than what you might originally think. So they seem very simple at first glance, I think.
Yeah, with simplicity comes power, though. That's the interesting thing for me because you can have a very convoluted framework and get nowhere. It's a very simple framework that you can follow. Breeds that transparency and that mechanism to allow you to make those incremental changes. So if I was a CEO saying to you, why do I want objectives and key results in my organisation? How would you answer that, Ben?
Yeah, it's a classic one. And really, I don't think, sold OKRs to anyone in the last few years. What's been happening is execs will literally be introduced through the network, and they'll say, "Oh, I should talk to this guy, Ben. He's done this OKRs a few times, and he's made a bunch of mistakes. So maybe you should talk to him first." And the execs I speak to, they're always asking about issues around alignment. So a lot of organizations I work with, they're really conscious of the fact that different functions like technology and product or sales could be going in different directions. So if you're the CEO, you really notice that the turf wars, the tensions, the silos, because that's what filters up to the top of the organization. And so that pain is felt, I think, many days by many execs that we're not on the same page, we're not going in the same direction. And I think you and I would know there's some systemic issues that may cause that, like underlying structural and incentive-based stuff that can create situations like that. Things like KPIs can definitely play a role in that. And I think they're looking to OKRs to add some transparency and some clarity. But I think more than anything, alignment hurts. Lack of alignment really hurts at that level.
Yeah, it's getting that direction of travel that everybody's heading in the same way, right?
Yeah.
Let me pick you up a little bit on that, because I heard you say KPIs in there. And, the thing I hear in organizations a lot is, well, what's the difference between an OKR and a KPI? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess I've really noticed introducing OKRs that they're great at a team level and it all makes complete sense. But when you're working with an exec, you run into the board of directors, and how does the board work with the exec team? And very often that's through contracts that include KPIs. And so what's interesting about that setup is that most of the very large organizations I work with kind of use KPIs as a control and objective setting tool for individual execs. So your CEO will have a set of KPIs, your sales teams, your particularly like even tech and product leaders might have KPIs written into their contract. And what's interesting about these is that they're a mechanism of control and remuneration of rewards. So it's based in this idea that if you're a board of directors and you're trying to at least have some constraints and some controls around your executive team, you're going to use KPIs as a lever, as a tool. And I think what's interesting about that is it does set up a structure, a system of work that has this kind of functional individual execs have particular goals they're going for, whether that's revenue pressure or it's growth or whatever it is that they're going for. And as we know, that's not how we think about teams and cross-functional teams. It's not how we think about agile goal setting. It's kind of at odds with the way modern teams, particularly in tech and product and design work. So I see that eventually your OKRs will run up against that problem, where good OKRs don't look the same as traditional KPIs.
Yes.
And they have a different purpose, I guess, is probably the biggest problem there.
Yeah, that is what I see. And I think the one that I see that there's hard understanding of, which I'll be happy to get your point of view on, but so we know with OKRs that they're meant to be, or the point of the aspirational to push that dial to the right. And with it, sometimes you are trying to stretch goal it, right? So essentially, sometimes 80% is great enough. You don't need the 100%. Or whereas with KPIs, they're a rock solid remuneration. It's just a control mechanism, and if you don't get them, you don't get, or whatever that may be. How do you tackle that? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, aspirational OKRs is really interesting, particularly because one of the first times I ever used OKRs, I was in Germany. And I have to say, like, cultural differences around aspirational goal setting really do exist. So if you're in the US and you talk about, shooting for the moon, if you're American, probably even Australian to some extent, you understand what that means. But if you sit down to a German and say, like, set a stretch goal, that'll make you more creative, it'll generate ideas, they kind of look at you like you're absolutely crazy. Like, what are you talking about? You set the goal that you're going to reach. You don't stretch. Like, that's wishful thinking to most of my colleagues in Germany. And so I felt like there's a time and a place for aspirational goals, and it's why do we set aspirational goals and OKRs? It's to encourage creativity. It's to encourage more options to be put on the table, to break people out of the status quo, like just doing it the way you always have. So by setting an aspirational goal, you're hoping to generate that kind of creativity and autonomy and better results. You're not doing it because you want to set up a target that's unreachable, which is how it's interpreted by some people. And so if you're new to OKRs, or your team is completely new to this kind of goal setting technique, I recommend to clients just to go gently. And if your team totally is afraid of being asked to achieve the impossible, then that's a lack of psychological safety. They're afraid of failing. So it's not going to work. It's just going to make people feel uncomfortable. So in those instances, I suggest you don't use aspirational goals if it feels unsafe to do so.
Yeah, so the other one that I see is the cascading effect. So we know with KPIs in organizations and enterprises, often somebody gets a KPI and it's the old proverbial rolls downhill and everybody inherits that KPI in some shape or form, right? So with OKRs, the thing that I see is a very it takes a lot to understand that, yes, you've got objectives and key results here for perhaps the steering or executive layer, right? How does that translate to the objectives and key results that your teams would create? Obviously, you want the alignment, but they're not going to be exactly the standard. Then you don't just drop them on them saying, "Here's your objectives and key results," because that doesn't work. Do you see that happening, or have you come across that?
Yeah, the whole question of cascading versus aligning is really interesting. So I love Christina Vodka's work on this, saying like don't cascade your OKRs. You want them to align, and by that, Felipe also talks about this. And this is this idea that you want bottom up and top down inputs into your goals, because if it's just top down, then they become a mechanism of command and control that has no knowledge of the work, doesn't really have bottom up input. So yeah, particularly I think the meeting in the middle can be one of the trickiest things to get right for an organization. I think it can be very handy to start with having very few, very focused company level OKRs, because that gives you like a North Star, a guiding light, a vision for where you're heading as an organization. And then have many bottom-up candidate OKRs. They're owned by the teams. The teams own those OKRs. They use them for themselves to succeed. And then the art of alignment would be to look for opportunities to align between teams and notice where there is any conflict or between the company OKRs and the teams. But I strongly have noticed that there is a tendency in some early to OKR teams to just want to be told what to do. And I think that reflects how they've worked in the past. Like if you're a team that's been an order taking type team, then you're used to just being told what to build. And so being asked to come up with your own OKR is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. So the other one is measurement, right? So I either see it go one of two ways, and I'm interested to hear from you because you've been doing a lot. I either see it go to the right, where they go, "Oh, we got OKRs, we don't need to measure anything," or I see it the other way, where we have to measure to the nth degree, and it's literally the type of KPI measurement, and we're measuring it to the nth degree, and you need to get 100%, et cetera, where we know it's really not in that way. Talk to me a little bit about your experience with that, Ben.
Yeah, I guess I'm cognizant of what Deming used to say, is that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be useful, or words to that effect. And so that is often on my mind when people start arguing about the measures and are we going to make it, and I think the nuance here is that OKRs could be good or they could be evil. They could work well for you or they could be a pain in the butt. And it really depends upon how you think about those key results and those measures. Do you think about them as a target you must meet? That feels heavy and unuseful, not very useful, and probably feels like an imposition. Whereas if you think about that as a measure, as a signal, a way to learn, I feel like that's more powerful, because then you stop arguing about the actual number. You start thinking about, well, what is this telling us? What are we learning from this metric? And so, yeah, I very much like that way of thinking about it, as more useful.
Yeah, I like that, because it is something that people struggle with, and of course they read the seminal text on it, John Doerr, and et cetera, and it does talk about that, but then I think it doesn't quite match up to the corporate structure, and then they're trying to fit the corporate structure into the framework. And the thing I say with any kind of framework, I've said it in a few of the other interviews, is you really want to take the framework into the context of your organisation rather than vice versa.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. So the other one I want to ask you about is often what I see organisations struggling with. They try to align the OKR to the piece of work or to the initiative and say the OKR will satisfy the initiative, whereas really we're trying to flip that on its head in thought. Your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I've seen that happen when OKRs are introduced and you already have a program planning process that spits out initiatives, and then you're trying to overlay OKRs onto that. And depending on the size of your initiative, maybe an OKR is appropriate at a very large initiative level, because that describes the goal and what success would look like. So that's a useful communication tool for a goal setting framework. That for this very large initiative, this is the objective and here are the measures for success. That feels like, you know, useful communication. However, yeah, I think it's almost like the going backwards, you know, the cart leading the horse, where you start with the output or the project and you try to derive the outcome that you're going to measure. That can get really tricky, because sometimes your initiatives aren't going to be very suitable for outcome thinking. By that, I mean, some of your initiatives don't have clear customer benefit, and that makes it really hard to write a good OKR for them. So I think it's often better to start with what is the customer benefit that you're trying to achieve, what behaviors you're trying to change, you know, what would be different in the world if you succeeded as an organization or as an area or as a team. And then your initiatives are a sub part of that set of goals. So you may have many different initiatives which you could think of as experiments or different ways to achieve that goal, whereas the objective is the outcome, the thing you're trying to achieve. Initiatives are just a way of achieving that, if that makes sense.
No, that makes exactly how I see it as well, and talk to them. So it's good to hear that I'm not alone or an island on that one.
Mm-hmm.
I could continue on with the OKRs conversation forever, but you do a lot more than the OKRs. So I do want to talk about that a little bit. What I would say to everybody is, Ben's probably underplaying himself a bit. He really is one of the people in the world today, if you want to do something with OKRs, that you want to talk to. So my advice would be, get in touch with them, and we'll talk about how you can do that later on. Let's talk a little bit about the Freshwater Academy, which sort of spans into some of the new stuff that you're doing. It's not just OKRs.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the Freshwater Academy and the product coaching and etc.
Yeah, so Freshwater Academy was basically born in a pandemic. I was living at Freshwater Place, which is in Melbourne, in Australia, and that's where the name came from. I just had a tightening of the budget impact on my consulting work, and I was sitting there at home thinking, what the hell am I going to do? And I thought what I was going to do was create this great product management training business. And people kept ringing me up and saying, can you teach us OKRs?
Yeah.
So like after about the third time, I was like, maybe it's not a product management thing. Let's go and teach OKRs. So my first course I built was an OKR training course. There's videos, there's templates, there's downloads, there's a whole like flagship program there that you can just take if you want to learn how to run them. I've got a leadership version. I've got the OKR Champions program. So the OKR thing was really well put together as a product that I can now offer to clients, either as a service or as a licensing thing. You can just license that material if you want. But then recently, the last couple of years, I've been lucky enough to get back a little bit to that passion project, which was really thinking about end-to-end product development and all the parts involved in that. So if you're thinking about academy and uplifting the capability in organizations, what do you do? And I think this came from building an internal academy at a previous client in Berlin. So I was working in Berlin and I was in charge of building a tech academy for product and tech. And so that was really fun. I'd never done that before. It was so much fun to think about how do you help these really awesome teams and really great humans be even better? Like, what do you do to help with that? And I guess I've managed to come back now and think about what are all the capabilities that an organization needs to succeed in product development. And it's huge. I've made a list on my website if you're interested. But one of the ones that's been really popular is product discovery, talking about how do we find out what the right thing to build is, not how to build it right. And so that exploring customer interviews, exploring the whole end-to-end continuous product discovery process has been really exciting recently. And I was lucky enough to read Teresa Torres's great book. And you should definitely get Teresa on the channel if you get a chance. She's brilliant, which is Continuous Product Discovery Habits. And I managed to get a chance to teach that to a client recently where they went through this sort of 8-week program, and every week we were teaching basically, a chunk of Teresa's book, and it's a really good process. I couldn't recommend it more highly. So that's been really exciting. So I'm hoping to do some more of that with some clients. And even more recently, I've been doing product coaching as a product coach, working in the product function which is a bit different for me because my background was tech and then agile coaching and delivery management and all of that good stuff. And so being on the product side really fits with, I guess, the OKR work I was doing and some of the other stuff. And so what's interesting about the work I'm doing is it's super different from when you and I worked together. Like when you and I worked together, we were carrying sticky notes around in our backpacks. We had index cards and blue tack. Do you remember that? And do you remember sticking the blue tack on the back of the index cards? And now we have Miro and Mural. It's amazing, right? And so my whole life in terms of how I actually do coaching has completely shifted from what was like 99% face-to-face on site to what is now 99% remote. All the work I'm doing is now remote. It's amazing. And it's changed my, I guess, thinking and feeling about how work works in this coaching role. So like a product coach is someone who's helping product managers typically to improve their processes, improve their ways of working, think about efficiency or capability uplift or learning new techniques. And it turns out that's really convenient to do remotely because these are busy people which have packed calendars. Like talk about stretched humans. The product managers I work with are absolutely busy,
multiple areas and
stretched so thin, right? And so
disciplines are just their disciplines in
right.
itself are quite large. So yeah.
So sitting around 5 days a week at a client trying to get in with the product managers just isn't workable. But what I can do is I'm working 1 or 2 hours with one team or 1 or 2 hours with another team each day. And that's been really flexible. So this idea of the flexibility of remote working has really blown my mind. And it's enabled these kinds of longer running, lower hours, kind of consulting coaching work across multiple clients. And I think that's really exciting as a future of work. And I guess, who am I talking to? Like,
but that's it's good for other people to hear it from people like yourself because as you said, we've been through that journey, right? We spent a long time, Agile Manifesto, face-to-face, et cetera. And what I say to people is, well, it's face-to-face now. We're just using different mechanisms to do it. So it doesn't change. It's just thinking differently in the space about how we do this coordinated capability of talking to people and using the new tools and online. What about life balance? I think people will be interested to hear about that. Does it change the balance of life for you?
It's just so good. Like getting up in the morning, getting to go to the coffee shop, go for a walk without that stress of getting to the commute to be on time at the client site at like some arbitrary 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. start. Depending on the client, they would have a culture of starting a particular time. And people were there for no other reason than that's the way things were done around here. Like they weren't there because they had to be there often. It was just because we all start at a particular time. And once I've broken free of that, I found I'm spending more time, outdoors, a bit more time, out and about and managing my time a bit more effectively. It also means I've got more energy to do work if I need to. For London, for example, I've got a client in London and I've had clients in Germany, and that means evenings. And I have to say the flexibility to be able to shift your time zone around because you're not locked into a particular schedule has been really helpful. It really allows that to be possible, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing now is that it's opened it up across the world. I think that's what organisations are starting to have to come to the grips with is that you can have the brightest and the best, doesn't matter where they are in the world, and people want to work in those hours. They don't have to work for you anymore. If you're saying we have to be in there physically, they can work for anyone, anywhere across the world. So you've got to be actually understanding how to do this to compete now.
And just practically, being remote has forced us to use new tools and new ways of communicating. And so as all the remote AF folk will know, like Miro is like the way you end up capturing and organizing and documenting your thoughts. And so what I'm noticing is that very, very good for synchronous and asynchronous working is having all of these digital artifacts. And that's been really helpful for my practice in coaching, where every coaching session isn't just a conversation anymore. Every coaching session also includes a canvas, which we fill out together and is always there as documentation. We have that, we can look at that a month later and we have all of the outputs, all of the thinking, all the diagrams, all the visualizations of that that moment, that coaching moment, available to us as documentation, and that's been super helpful. Like and great for sharing with others as well. It's been really effective for me, I think.
It's changed the course, hasn't it? And there are so many tools out there now. So we do talk about many of those that you can use to help you do all of those sorts of things. Miro's one, you got Mural, you got there's a plethora, Lucid Charts, whatever your derivative is, there's something to help you get where you need to go.
Yeah.
Ben, we're really close to the end of our time. It's been great having you on. I'd like to have gone longer, but how do people get in touch with you? How can they get involved? Not just OKRs people. He does product coaching, he does agile coaching, he does lean coaching. How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm Ben at agileben.com. I'm AgileBen on Twitter. I'm AgileBen on LinkedIn. So yeah, find me there, or my website for the Freshwater Academy is freshwater.academy. So yeah, email me at any of those addresses. Get in touch and feel free to book in a chat in my calendar. If you just want to have a yarn about some of these topics, I'm always happy to talk.
Absolutely brilliant. Listen, if you're listening to this and you really enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe and like, and also join our Remote AF community at remoteaf.co. Click the community button. You can join the community as well. Really enjoyed having you on, Ben. Thanks for being part of all the remote things for all things remote. Have a great day.
Thanks, Tammy.